Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for episode 123 of the MeepleCore Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Jennette the Metal Meeple, and in this episode, I review the video game Outriders for the PC and much more. You heard me right, folks. It is just I, Tim, on this episode. George is finishing the book, and actually I'm recording this after the deadline, but his deadline was last Friday, so he will be on for the next episode going forward. It's really nice that he has finished this because this thing has taken a lot of time. So hopefully you're okay with just hearing my voice for this episode. And on top of that, hopefully you're okay hearing a review for a video game. I know we call ourselves a gaming podcast, but typically we are doing a lot of board games and we briefly talk about video games. But this episode is definitely dedicated to a game I have put a lot of time in recently, and that is Outriders, specifically for the PC. But before we get into all that, we are going to do what we always do. Intern Alexa, ask a random question.
Here's a question for you. If you could time travel, where would you go?
If I can time travel. All right. I kind of know the answer to this. I'm going to say feudal Japan, although health-wise, it's probably not a smart move because feudal Japan definitely had its share of crazy time frame as, diseases and just people not, being as friendly to each other, things like that. However, let's put all that aside because obviously, unless you're going back very recent in the past, everyone or every time frame is going to have those kind of problems. So I'm going to say feudal Japan because it is my favorite part of history. I love the idea behind the ninjas and like the weaponry they used and stuff. And I get it. I mean, ninjas are way different in pop culture than they were actually back in the past. If you go and read books about ninjas, a lot of the stuff that makes them seem like to have magical powers is just simply from the innovation of the weaponry and different things they had. Like, for instance, just so you can learn some ninja trivia stuff here, ninjas had a straight-bladed weapon called the ninjato, which resembles a katana, but it is a straight-bladed weapon. Oftentimes, this was not that sharp. It was kind of more blunted because they weren't trying to fight with it. They were using it as a tool. The reason that it's tsuba, which is the little part above where your hand is, so if somebody tries to slide a blade down, it won't cut your fingers, or, like the hand guard, I guess. The reason that is so big is simply because they would use it as a stepping stone or a ladder. They would position one of the myths about ninjas is they can jump really high, right? And jump over walls and things like that. What actually would happen is they would be running and being chased by guards or whatever, and they would throw their ninjato against the wall. They'd have a string attached to it. They would jump onto the tsuba, and it would allow them to leap another 2 or 3 feet in the air, which is usually tall enough to clear a lot of the walls around cities. And then they would lift their katana or their ninjato up with that string and then jump off the other side of the wall. And they would do this so fast that people just, got out, or people would spread the rumor that, whoa, these ninjas came in and they can jump over walls and things like that. So there is one trivia about ninjas if you wanted to know anything about them. I have a massive catalog of knowledge on ninjas and assassins and that time frame and era, specifically to their weapons and, what they would do in, assassinations and stuff. It's really fascinating, especially if you start reading a lot of the books and how different it is from what you perceive ninjas to actually be, or ninja, since, it's basically plural. Anyway, we're going to move on. This episode is going to be a lot shorter than normal. Again, if you're tuning in, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully you like the review. But before we always get to the review, George and I always talk about what we've been up to since last episode. We are a weekly podcast, so not a whole lot. I have been playing League of Legends Wild Rift on the mobile on my iPhone, and I am loving it. I have about 110 games in. Not bad for about a month of playing, and it is phenomenal. It's just such a good game. I like League of Legends a whole lot, but I actually like this one a lot better. much quicker battles, which, maybe for the in-game people, it's not as competitive. I don't know. I'm not really getting into it that deep, but it still is really good. Other than that, I've been playing Cat Quest 2 on the Nintendo Switch with my son. We just got that in the mail, and we had played the demo and everything, and it's a fun little game. It's like an introductory RPG / Diablo type of game, and it works really well for a 5-year-old. Let's just put it that way. And since it's cute and things, and he's super into animals right now, it really is making a good splash with him, which is always a really fun thing to see him get excited about. So anyway, before we get into the review, I just want to let you know, obviously, if you want to support the podcast, you can check out humblebundle.com. Actually, go to MeepleCore.com and click our Humble Bundle partner link. Anything you buy from the Humble Bundle will give us a little bit of kickback, help support the show. But honestly, that's just because I like Humble Bundle so much. I don't even care about the money. I do this for fun. I'm not trying to make a career out of it or anything. I've already got all the equipment that I need through my normal purchases, so I'm good. That's just going to help cover the monthly cost, which would be cool. It's not that much. And if I get more money than that, then it goes straight into the podcast. Maybe I'll buy more equipment and start streaming. I don't know. We'll see, but it's definitely going into this. If you want to help us out and not spend anything, which will actually greatly help us out more, please check out your whatever podcast app that you use, or our Facebook group page or anything like that, and give it a review. Just simply 5-star it if you would, please, or whatever you feel like it needs. And then leave a little blurb on why you like the podcast. It just really helps the algorithm push us to other people. And again, I'd rather just people listen to it. I don't even care about making money. I have a really great career, and, I'm not really looking to switch off. So that's a pipe dream, and, whatever. I'm just excited to talk, and I'm excited for people to listen. So check those things out. And, we're going to get on to the review of Outriders. Thanks for joining me for this review of Outriders. If you're new to the MeepleCore podcast, I want to thank you for joining us. We are a gaming podcast. Mostly we talk about board games, but I definitely bring up some video game stuff here and there. And one of the games I've been playing recently a whole lot is Outriders for the PC. I've got about 50 hours into this game and a lot to say. So without further ado, let's just jump straight in and start with, what kind of game is it? Well, first off, I don't do any kind of scripting. Hopefully that doesn't bother you guys. This is a podcast. I just speak, and I have notes and things I go on, but I don't script any of this. So I'm sorry if I cough here and there or whatever. I don't edit it out either, especially not on the video. So if you're watching the video, I apologize. I usually cut that stuff out on the podcast version though. Anyway, Outriders is a game for the PC that's modeled mostly after games like Diablo, where you're going to be fighting a lot of waves of enemies and just doing tons of damage and throwing all these crazy spells everywhere. It's, misconstrued as games like Destiny or even like The Division. Actually, it probably is closer to The Division, but it really doesn't feel like playing Destiny at all. It has this cover system, and you're running through all these areas that kind of give you more of a Diablo vibe, and you keep progressing forward, which again provides a Diablo vibe. You fight lots of guys and stuff, which you do in Destiny and Borderlands and stuff. Anyway, this is a looter shooter. It's over the shoulder. It's third person. And the game is all about loot. Now, there's a lot of things I'm going to say that is kind of negative against the game. There are some things I'm going to say it's positive, and then I'm going to sum it all up in the end. I'm going to try to keep this not super, super long, but I'll go over a lot of my thoughts that I've wrote down, and then we'll clarify it at the very end. But the game has a lot of loot. And if anything, if there's nothing else this game gets right, it definitely gets the loot right. You get tons of loot for everything, except there are categories of loot, just like in other games. You've got, the greens, the blues, the purples, and the orange. And the orange are legendaries. And you virtually never see these things, right, when you're going through the main game. Which is a shame, because a lot of the legendaries are awesome. But when you do get one, it's even worse, because the legendaries have 2 abilities on them. There's weapon abilities and there's armor abilities, and they're tier 1, 2, and 3. And you'll get the tier 3s only from legendary gear. Now, in this game, it has a lot of customization where you can strip the item down and you get the mods from it and some other stuff. But essentially you can take those mods and put them on any gear that you want, or any weapon, weapon mods on other weapons, armor mods on other weapon or on other armors. And that's nice, but you lose the legendary in the process, and you can only upgrade one of its 2 abilities. So it gets a little clunky there because you almost have to find all these god rolls for everything. You find a thing that drops like even a piece of armor, you got to make sure it has the right 3 stats, which those stats are like health regeneration or bonus firepower or anomaly power, things like that, in addition to the 2 mods that it has. So there's a lot that the armor can have, and there's a lot that you're looking for. So if something drops, it's very rare that you're going to have a god roll where all 5 of those things meet what class you are and how you got your class designed and what skills you're using and things like that. So that's a little bit on there, but we'll come back to that here in a minute. So let's start with saying, is this game fun? Yes, to me. And if you like games that are looter shooters. However, just like games like Diablo, it's going to be a lot of the same grindy feel. As you go through areas, these areas are very linear, where each area of a zone is kind of small. You can run through it in 10, 15 seconds, and you might spend 5 minutes in each place just fighting the guys. So it gets grindy and it gets repetitive, but at the same time, I do like what I'm doing while I'm playing it. It's just that when you take a step back and you say, if I objectively have to say, is this game a great game? I'm going to say that part of it kind of is repetitive and grindy. It does have this world tier system that increases with you. So the challenge is always there, right? As you're playing it, your world tier increases. You get better. If you're a Diablo fan, like Magic Find, which means that it's not called that. It's like legendary drop rate or something, but it basically is going to give you a better percentage of getting better gear as you're playing. And that's really nice. The game gets really hard though when it's on that, especially if you're playing alone, because when you play alone and you go down, you're out. You will respawn. You'll have to play that whole section again. It's not super bad. It's usually that encounter, quote unquote, like whatever area you're in, you just start that again. But if you have somebody else with you, it gets, obviously the game scales a little bit for multiplayers, but at the same time, you can go down as many times as you want, as long as you both don't go down at the same time. So very reminiscent of other games that are out there and doing the same stuff. It's just that the world tier system is pretty cool because it makes the game harder, but you get better rewards. Although I still really didn't get any legendaries other than maybe off of 2 or 3 of the bosses throughout the entire game. You get a lot of your legendaries in post game or the end game where you're doing all these grindy expeditions. And while you're playing the game, there's one thing that you use quite a bit at the beginning and you realize this is kind of nonsense. There's a cover system where they have a bunch of terrain, sitting out there, little walls and such that you can climb or get behind and hit the button and your guy crouches up against it. It's in a lot of other games. You've seen it. And you can blind fire, you can get up and shoot and go back into cover. And there's some skills that are revolving or that revolve around the ability to cover fire. However, it's almost unnecessary the further you get into the game. You realize that you don't have time to do all that, right? You don't need to go in and do those things simply because it's faster to kill the guys if you don't go into cover, which is kind of a shame because, that is that's a system that's just kind of like built into the game. I just don't think they really capitalize on players using it as much. I don't know. Not very impressed by the cover system. I'd almost rather it go away and they would have put a jump in the game instead. Typically when I play games without jump, I'm like, uninstall, I'm done with this. I like jumps. However, the cover system is, I guess, supposed to, replace jump with that cover system. It just didn't work out. There should have been a little bit more platforming in the game. There's zero platforming, obviously, because you can't jump. And there's very little verticalities. There's barely other stairs that you can go up. It might be like you go up a stairs and it's like a crow's nest that you're shooting from or something like that. But I don't know. It would have been much better with a jump system and some platforming. That would have been really, really cool. The other thing about the game is there's no fast travel. So when you're playing the game, you literally have to go back to camp or go back to these like waypoints, which you shove this big flag in, and it has a place to refill your ammo and such. That's all fine and dandy. However, that only allows you to warp throughout the map. There might be multiple places to travel within the same map, but to get to another area, or let's just say zone. So to get to another zone on the map, you actually have to go back to Chana or Jakob or whoever, where your main camp is of that area, and then use them to see the world map to go to the different points in the world map. And it's very clunky because why can't you just fast travel from anywhere just by hitting escape and going to like a fast travel? It's unnecessary that you have to make so many hops just to get to a point where you can see the world map and travel. And there's really no way to bring up the world map either, unless you go back to those people. So that part I wasn't very impressed with. That's very clunky. And speaking of the map, actually, what makes it even more clunkier is the fact that it has no indication of where you're at. You will see, like, say you have a map, you have like 5 or 6 zones in that map. One of them will be highlighted barely that says you are here, but it doesn't tell you in that area where you're actually at. So if you picture like that area looks like the letter E, like a capitalized E. So you have 3 things protruding off of a main line. You don't know where at in there you are. And that might not seem super confusing, but some of the areas are a little bit bigger and they have multiple points that you can leave from. And that's where it gets to be problematic because your mini map or anything else doesn't tell you where true north is. So you don't have any orientation to it either, unless there's some kind of, I guess, landmark or things like that that's on the map, like your camp or maybe a quest icon. But then if you did that quest and the quest icon isn't there or something, you just don't know which way to go. It's really crazy because the game is so linear on the maps that, you know, that actually becomes a problem, but it actually is. And it's quite annoying. As far as the rest of the gameplay, though, I did have a lot of fun playing it. Your character classes have some really cool, distinctive characteristics between them. There's 4 different classes: the Pyromancer, the Technomancer, the Devastator, and the Trickster. The Pyromancer is like a mage. It just throws out all this fire and things like that. The Technomancer has all these gadgets he'll throw down, like little turrets or throwing landmines and grenades and such. The Devastator is kind of like the tank. They have tankier abilities. And the Trickster has all these like sneaky teleportation attacks, or it can put this like thing around him to make everything around like a big sphere that slows everything down. The character classes are really cool. I've played all 4 of them. The Pyromancer I've played the most, although I have played with the abilities of all the other 3, just not, level them all up. And I will say that they are really fun to play. All 4 classes seem to be actually quite fun and different. The problem is, though, is the game really relies or has some sort of emphasis on firepower being really good, or at least in the early game or throughout the game and the early end game. So using your gun and using the specific bullet enhancing abilities seems to be the path to go. And it's not just by a little bit, it is by an insane amount. Luckily, you don't really notice that as you're playing the game, but you do quite notice it in the end game because everything is like this speed run where you play these expeditions. And as you're going through the expeditions, it's like finish it faster and you get gold, or finish it slower, you get silver, then copper, or the weakest reward. And so you want to go through it as fast as possible. And that's fine. However, the problem is it shows you damage at the end. And so certain classes or builds basically can't even play the in-game competitively because people will kick you out of their group for not doing as much damage. So unless you got friends that are like, it's okay, dude, if you're doing like 10% of the damage in the 3-player game, then you're going to get kicked out a lot. As a matter of fact, playing multiplayer, I have literally never had a Devastator join my party at all. I've always been joined by, I would say 80% of the time, it's another Technomancer, and 10% of the time it's another pyromancer. Well, I don't know. The pyromancer and trickster are about equal. Technomancer is by far the most favorite character class. I don't know if people are just picking them because it's neat or if they know it does a ton of damage in the end game. But I never see Devastators. I've never had one join me, and that's crazy. So really sad for that. Hopefully that kind of gets changed up a little bit where it's not as a big deal, like they rebalance that class or something, because it needs it. And as far as the classes go, I almost wish everything had more of a role to play, because even though I say Devastator and it's sitting there taking damage or whatever, it's not really taking any damage. It's, I think it has a taunt if I remember correctly, but it's really not that big of a deal because every class can heal. Every class has these skills that will allow it to heal, or just base game, your weapon damage. You can, when you get your gear, your armors, you can get armors that have like healing on it. So as you do damage, you heal yourself. Even the Pyromancer has a built-in ability where if it marks a target, simply by hitting it with a skill, it can heal itself based on the damage it does to it. So everything is healing itself, and there's really no need to have that trifecta of the healer, DPS, and a tank. Although I think the game would probably have worked out a little bit better if it did, because everyone's just shooting things, and your skills almost don't matter so much, I guess. I mean, they matter for damage, but they don't matter for like utility or not. Or maybe people are going to yell at me and say, you just haven't played it long enough to find all the deep stuff. But I finished the game and the in-game content, and we didn't need it. So if there is, and that stuff does play a role and makes it easier, it's number one, unnecessary, because you can finish every bit of the content, including in-game, without that mindset. And two, it's just not prevalent. It doesn't really tell you anything to make you, oh, this is my role, I'm supposed to be helping everybody around me, blah, blah, blah. No, you're just doing damage. All your abilities do damage. They do damage in cool, different particle effect ways. So it would have been neat if it had more of a, a way to define having like the healer or the tank or the DPS, or at least somewhat like that. But at the same time, nothing in the game has any kind of interesting mechanisms to capitalize on that. So there's only, 5 main bosses in the game that you fight. So from here on out, it's a lot of spoilers probably, because I'm going to get into the story and stuff next, but I'm assuming at this point you don't care, or you've already played the game and you're just wondering what somebody else thinks about it. So there are quite a bit of bad guys in the game, but none of them really do anything. There's a couple of guys who will throw out like some skills and specials and stuff because they're altereds. They have spells. They're kind of like, this thing hits an area and spins, just move away from it. Or maybe like there's a lot of telltale signs where it draws a red area on the ground. You have to get out of the way. Although I will say some of the bad guys, they don't care. They put that red bar down on the ground, and as you move, it moves with you. So there's like no way to dodge it. I don't know if that's like a multiplayer lag type of thing, because we did experience a little bit of server issues and things like that. I mean, as you know, any game that just gets released has those kind of issues, and this game was very prone to it in the beginning. But even still today, it seems like some of those bad guys, telltale signs, are going to hit you no matter what, and that's just kind of annoying. But other than the main like little mini bosses, there's only like 5 or 6 big bosses, like where there's a really cool event going on. There's like this snake looking dragon thing. I can't remember what it actually was, but he like smashes through the rocks and all these rocks fall on you and stuff. You got to dodge those. That was really cool because there was a lot of environmental mechanics to dodge or to get out of the way from, but there's nothing in the game that really has a feel other than the very final boss of the expeditions. There's nothing that's like you have to be doing something else while you're fighting. And I think that's a shame because some of these fights could have really used it. The first main boss you run into is kind of, it really reminds me of Enixia fights from World of Warcraft, where you're in this like lava area. It's a big spider, but like, it'll break apart the ground. You have to move around and don't fall in the lava and things like that. but you're not doing anything else while this is happening. It will do like a event where it runs around and you have to fight all these little things. And then when they're all dead, mostly just to get the ammo back, and then it'll come back. And then there's like 3 phases to the fight, but there's really nothing else going on that you have to do. I don't know, like raid mechanisms in MMOs and such, where something's going on, like these things are always spinning. You have to deactivate them while you're fighting or whatever, none of that. It's just really straightforward battles. Although the boss fights were really cool for the most part. A lot of them were I'd say about half of the main boss fights were fun. The other half were like, okay, this is a little bit different, but it wasn't anything special. Like there's a lot of inspiration out there and they chose to completely ignore all of it. So anyway, the boss fights were probably one of the coolest things of the game. And that's really not saying much as far as how different the character, the bad guys fights were. Spoiler alert with this one though, is to put it this way, this is the most complicated fight. The very last fight where you fight, Yagak on the final expedition in the Eye of the Storm. Basically there's these like little pillars that have this like protective aura around it, and you have to stand in it long enough for it to be destroyed and then move to the next one and then it gets destroyed. And you have to stay within it because if bad guys get in it, they disable like that protective field and you really get messed up. That's it. Once you fight all those, then you fight him. But it's just like, that is about as deep as the fights actually get, other than just shooting bullets at something for about 5, 6, 10 minutes. Which it's fun. I know I'm sounding really negative about the game. There's a lot of negative things to say, but it doesn't mean that something's not fun. It just means that if I had to take a step back and really analyze it, what am I going to dig at the game for? Let's go to the story real quick though. I will say that for me, the story was actually pretty entertaining. This is a very big spoiler alert, but at this point, I'm not going to mention spoilers anymore because the rest of this is basically spoilers. The story is basically your Earth is being destroyed. Everybody's leaving it. They go into cryostasis until 80 something years. They go to this other planet and they're going to try to inhabit it. But the planet's really mean to them with these anomalies that just mess everything up. And you get thrown back into cryostasis or whatever it's called. And you are frozen for another 20 or 30 years. You come out of it to find basically that civilization there has turned into Mad Max, right? Everybody's killing each other and there's all these faction wars going on and et cetera, et cetera. And you are trying to find the origin of this signal that you heard when you were out in the forest before you went back into cryostasis. And this doctor assists you and you go and do this. And it's kind of neat because as it's going, you're like, what is going on? Like, I don't truly understand what the anomaly is. Are there aliens on this planet? Like what could be making this distress signal that you're going to find, right? Because the idea was these were supposed to be from the Flores, which is the ship that put you all there. But this signal doesn't sound like it was from that. So it's like, are there humans here or what? And just finding out the ending to that was actually pretty cool. A lot of people said it was kind of boring or whatever. I thought it was a little bit different. I've never really seen that kind of storyline go on. So I thought it was kind of neat. The game has a really jarring opening that you can experience just by downloading the demo, which is free. I don't know if it's still out actually, but the demo, if you do have it, there's some really crazy stuff that goes on in that. It's a really fun demo. And the game is really good. I like it. And the story was really fun. Really cool. I when we logged in each night to play this game, I was curious on how it was going to unfold legitimately. And I didn't look up any spoilers or anything like that because I really wanted to see how this game unfolded as I played it. If you're familiar with games like Bulletstorm, as the game's unfolding, they're going to drop a lot of F-bombs and an amazing amount of cuss words are in this game. However, it's not as bad as Bulletstorm, where it felt like a 14-year-old was writing the script, but it seems like a 14-year-old wrote the script and then somebody revised it by taking out all the really stupid slapstick potty words and just kept F-bombs and actually had a pretty decent dialogue that happened from the characters. A lot of the voice acting was really good. I think at least for a handful of the main characters like Jakob and Channa, and the male main voice. I don't remember if the female main voice was good or not, but the male voice is actually really cool. He reminds me of this badass that's basically like a good guy, like a vigilante type of deal. Just with the way he responds, like, here we go again. I don't like doing this, but I gotta save people. You know, that kind of mentality. Not everybody's going to be attracted to it. You can't really change any of that. And for the most part, I don't remember the character selection being that deep either. So or not character selection, but character customization. So you don't even get an option of the voice as far as I remember, but it's okay. I did like the voice acting, and there's some really funny humor. I did laugh quite a bit just because it's so ridiculous. Anyway, so as far as replay value, right? The game, you go through the game, you finish the game, and then it unlocks these 14 expeditions. And this is where it really kind of comes a MMORPG in some ways, because you have to fight the expeditions on level 1, gear up, go to level 2, gear up. I mean, it's not that bad because you can usually, with your in-game gear, go to 6 or 7, and it goes all the way up to 15. Each time you complete an expedition on the current level that you're on, the current expedition level, so say you're on 6, in order to unlock 7, you just have to beat a stage and get a gold result, which means you have to beat it as fast as you can, right? Or within the time limit to get gold. And for the most part, there was only very few, maybe 3 times we kind of got to a stumbling block and had to play some of the ranks a little bit below just to get a couple of gold ratings to get gear. And it gives you a lot of gear. I'm talking a lot of gear. Each time you finish one of those, you got 15 items from it. It's crazy if you complete it with gold. And that's really cool. I really like that. However, 99% of the time, every bit of that gets dismantled because you want the stats from it so you can spend those stats on other armors and weapons and such. And that's cool to a point, but it just gets really grindy because you're not really excited about getting a ton of gear. It's just yay. You're only excited if you see a yellow or an orange, whatever color it is, legendary pop up in the pile of stuff that drops out of the drop pod. So otherwise, like I said, the end game is very grindy. It's very speed run style, which doesn't bode well for certain builds or classes such as this Devastator. They just get left behind in the damage. And that's really unfortunate because I hate playing games where it shows you who did the most damage, because in this game, it's not as bad because the game is all about damage, but playing MMORPGs, damage meters really irritate me because not every class is 100% damage. You do 20% utility and now you're only 80% effective against DPS classes that are 100% DPS. So you get that kind of stuff going on. Well, why aren't you pulling your weight? And it's just really annoying. You might jump in a game and play with somebody and they'll kick you out right after the first round. I never had that happen because I always played with friends for the most part and people joined us. So can't kick us out of our own game, but they'll leave, maybe we do a ton of damage because we put a lot of time into our builds and reading up on what does the most damage and stuff. It's not the most funnest build, I'll tell you that. It's all about shooting the gun, which, the game's about guns, but I really miss the spells, throwing a bunch of, I play a pyromancer. I like throwing all those spells around. They're much more fun than actually just shooting things. Right now, sometimes it gets to the point where I'll freeze an enemy or, somebody will freeze an enemy and I'll run straight up to its face and just sit there point blank holding down the button because as I'm shooting it in the face is it a critical hit, which is yellow damage. On top of that, it's giving me bullets back to my chamber every time I crit, or it's just not expending them. And so I just don't run out of ammo, don't have to reload the whole time that it's frozen, which might be 10 seconds. It's crazy. It's just bullets sponge the game. Anyway, we're going to move on. The customizing the weapons and everything is kind of neat, although I've mentioned a lot about it already, but they don't have any way to customize the colors of your armor or your weapons. Honestly, you only get legendary armor really at the post game or the in game or whatever. You don't see any legendary armor drop except for if you happen to do all the side quests and do I think all the beast side quests, you get a legendary helmet. Otherwise, you get a few weapons and then you don't even get armor until the very, very post in-game. It's crazy. I don't understand that. I don't even know if it drops, like armor drops in the main game. I think it only drops in expeditions. So it'll be cool if they add some way to color your weapons, but I don't know. I'm not very fond of running around with a bright neon green, weapon, like a Gatling gun that's all neon green. It's just crazy. And again, it just really irritates me to have to break down legendaries just to get more legendaries so that you can use the abilities from the previous legendaries on the new legendary. It's just a very, unnecessary cycle and grindy cycle. Last couple of things here, and then I'll tell you about my final thoughts, which will be interesting since I basically said about 25 negative things about this game. The map, again, is terrible. No way to indicate where you are. The quests are just clunky. When you get a new quest, sometimes you don't even really know to go. You can hit tab, which draws this beam of light that tracks you to where you should go. And half the time that's pointing you back to a travel point, and it's not to where you actually need to go. It's not the most efficient route. It's just all really bad. I don't understand how that made it through like playtest cycles. Honestly, it's just really clunky and unintuitive, especially since so many games do this well. Just copy that. The graphics are pretty good. They're not anything to write home about. They just do the job. I don't think it was really bad graphics. I think they're okay. The game is not super optimized. So even games that look better than it run at 60 frames or higher on my computer. And this was dipping some, which is not that big of a deal. But when there's so much going on, having 60 frames plus a second really matters, so that you can make sure you're diving at the right moment to get out of an area that's going to one-shot you, things like that. So, all right. Well, anyway, let's talk about the final score and verdict of this game and what I thought. Before I tell you the score, I'm going to preface a few things. Was it fun? Yes. I don't play games for 50 hours unless I'm actually having a good time. If it's bad, first off, I don't review video games enough to really warrant me having to play all the new stuff and endure, 50-hour games just so I can write a review and be like, I had a terrible time. No, I don't do that. Now I can objectively look at it and say, I had a lot of fun. This game sucks, because maybe there's so much in this game that isn't great, but it is a fun experience to go through. If you like story, I think the story is pretty good. I'm not going to say it's phenomenal and groundbreaking. There is a little bit of a twist that happens, which I thought was nice. I'll keep that I'll keep that as a non-mention because it was a pretty cool thing to have pop up. You're like, oh, that's a pretty cool little twist. I didn't see that coming, but it's tied into the whole game. It's not like watching Lost where they just threw something at you that made no sense. And for the most part, I thought the game was pretty good. We had a lot of fun playing it. It's only 3 players, which is kind of irritating. I wish it was more of a 4-player game for various reasons, just because 3-player games are fun, but I think 4 players is pretty much a standard. A lot of groups have 4 people that play together a lot, otherwise they're maybe playing with 2. And, I thought it was, I like getting the loot. I like the main game. Let's start there. The main game was a good experience. I like playing through it. I didn't do every side quest until after I finished the game, but as I was playing through it, we played about 70% of the side quest. It was a decent length for the money. Was it worth $60 at that point? I don't know. I was excited about it. The demo really sold me, so I'm okay with spending $60 for as much time as I got out of it. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I don't think the game is that amazing. I think it could have been amazing, and I think if they really take a lot of what people are saying in the forums and things like that, they can make it a phenomenal game if they come out with some DLC. I'm not saying they need to completely change what's going on, but if they make it a DLC with some really cool bosses and things like that, a lot of mechanisms going on, some things where maybe you have to use certain skills that you're not used to using because you need to do certain things, it could be a really, really nice DLC experience. But as of right now, the in-game content is very lackluster. They tote this 14 expeditions. No, look, It's like 14 stages, and most of them last between 7 and 10 minutes. They'll last longer if you don't get gold, but that's around the time frame that they are telling you need to beat the stage in order to get the best reward. Overall, I would say this game gets a 7 out of 10 for me. It was great. I actually thought about giving it a 6.5 at first, but I ended up upping it just a little bit because I did have so much fun with the game and playing with my friends that it does, it did occupy my time for 50 hours, but there's a lot of flaws. So I would say a 7 is really generous for me. 6.5 is probably more realistic as far as what everybody would consider good. Now, this rating scale is, just kind of made up in a way, according to like Metacritic scores and such. I think it has a little bit lower on the Metacritic scores, but I'm going to give it a little bit more just because I think that it has the potential to be really good. It has a lot of cool stuff there, but it has a lot of bad stuff too. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. And that is my review of Outriders. So hopefully you like this review and, you check out the game. So if you do, and you do decide that you want to purchase this, again, check out MeepleCore.com, click our Humble Bundle partner link, and buy the game from Humble Bundle. You will get a Steam code. So it's just like buying it from Steam. Now, obviously, if it's cheaper on Steam, just get it on Steam. If it's the same price or cheaper on Humble Bundle, maybe help us out a little bit. Anyway, I think we're going to wrap this episode up. So thanks again for tuning into episode 123 of the MeepleCore Gaming Podcast. This episode was recorded on May 12th, 2021. Please send questions and comments and hate mail for Outriders to meeplecore@gmail.com. Follow MeepleCore on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Check out the video versions of our show on youtube.com/MeepleCore. And until next time, this is Tim Jennette, the Metal Meeple. Keep on rocking and rolling dice.